bring in Dan Wetzel, senior writer, Yahoo Sports, wrote a story this morning about Mitch McGary going into the NBA draft in large part because if he returned to college, he would be suspended for an entire season. Dan, explain to me the rule that McGary broke and why this penalty is so severe.
Well, in general, Chris, they let the NCAA does not test for recreational drugs during the course of a year. They only test for performance-enhancing drugs. They leave also all drug testing, other drug testing for recreational drugs and for PEDs up to each individual school. And each school can set its own standards and its own penalties. So you have some schools that you get a first test, you get counseling. If you're at BYU, you're expelled, right? So each one has its own thing. However, when they get to the NCAA tournament of any sport or a bowl game, the NCAA then tests for recreational drugs also, which I don't know why, but they do. McGary failed a test during this NCAA tournament, even though he wasn't playing. He was just a guy on the bench basically cheering on his team. He hadn't played since mid-December because of a back injury and back surgery. But if you're with the traveling party at all, you are they're able to test you. So he got tested, failed it for marijuana, and the penalty for this at the time is 1 year suspension from all competition for a first failed recreational drug use test. Now, the NCAA has since decided to lower that to half a season, so maybe 14 games for 15 games for college basketball. But they are not applying it to McGary because it doesn't go into effect on August 1st, even though the rule has been passed at this point.
How long has this rule, how long has it been in place?
A while. I don't know the exact thing, but it's not a new rule, and the schools know about it. And I just talked to an AD at a Pac-12 school, and he said, "Look, we tell our players, like, we're testing you, but you have to be extremely careful during these tournaments." And this goes to all athletes, so it could be anybody, because if you get caught on this, you're gone for a year. The punishment is so severe. And Michigan actually tests their entire team right before the Big Ten tournament to try. They test randomly all the time, but then they test the whole team to try to catch anyone before it goes to this basically, you're only in the tournament as long as you last. So it could be 1 day, it could be 2.5 weeks, basically, this period of time when all of a sudden the penalty spikes up. It's like a speed trap almost. And the problem was they tested McGary right before the Big Ten tournament. He said he smoked after the Big Ten tournament. He got caught up, made a mistake. He wasn't even playing. He was never going to play. And I don't think he really thought of it as what was going to the ramifications here. So it's a very uneven policy, and obviously the penalty is far more severe.
Yeah.
Under NCAA, Michigan would have, on a first offense, would have suspended him 3 games. And if it had been a 3-game suspension, he would have had to face next year. He very, very well may have come back for his junior season because, hey, he misses 3 games, no big deal. But by missing an entire year, he'd have to put off his NBA draft for 2 years because then he has to play a whole season. He's already 21. Now you're 23. It's just not reasonable to expect anyone with the potential to make the NBA to do that.
Is he the most high-profile player to get caught up in this? Because we were talking during the show, and I can't think of another player that has faced this type of suspension for this offense.
I couldn't find one last night in researching it. The NCAA obviously can't provide it. It's kind of I don't think Stats Inc. keeps track of this thing. So,
that's incredible though, Dan, because it's college.
But most I think would just turn pro. McGary wanted to admit it, and he could have just come out today and said, "I'm going pro because I want to go pro," and that would be the story. He was worried that at some point he didn't want to live the lie. I talked to him extensively yesterday. He shook up about it. He's embarrassed about it. This isn't me, he says. He messed up. He doesn't want to have to live where he's sitting there going, what if the NBA finds out? Because they're going to put private eyes on you and all this. And if they find out, it looks like I'm hiding something. He just said, you know what? Here it is. I screwed up. Take it for what it is, but that's my situation. And so most guys, I think, would just say, I'm going pro and shutting up about this. And with federal laws, the NCAA and Michigan cannot say a word about this specifically because you have private health privacy laws and student privacy laws. So there's a chance they got away with it. We just don't know. But in terms of guy coming out and saying it or that we know about, as far as I know, Mitch McGary is the most high profile.
Do you think McGary would have gone pro if he had his eligibility next year?
I think he might have come back. I think if he had full eligibility, yeah, I think he would have come back. I think it was close, though. He's not, look, he was, late lottery, mid-first round last year. He has the back injury. He wants to go. It's not that doesn't think he's ready, but I think another year, I think he might have stayed. It just changed the whole dynamic because he no longer had a choice.
He's not a lottery pick anymore from what I hear. I mean,
No.
Even before I heard this, he was a back end of the first round kind of at best guy.
And who knows what this has to do with it.
Yeah.
I think if he was straight coming out as a pro, he would have declared he was going pro the day after the season. He hasn't played since mid-December. So it's not like he didn't have time to think about it or the plan wasn't done. So I think the fact that he was contemplating it, then he gets busted for the test and finds out, then they appeal. I mean, if he didn't want to stay at all, why appeal the decision? They appeal the decision when that gets rejected. That's when he decides, hey, I'm going pro.
Do you think this will lead to the NCAA changing this rule to make it less severe for such? And I don't mean to
Right.
make light of using a drug like marijuana, but this seems like an incredibly huge overreaction by the NCAA to a first-time offense. Do you think they'll change this rule, given what people are going to be talking about in the aftermath of your story?
Well, again, they already have acknowledged it was too severe by passing, and it takes a long time for the NCAA to change anything.
But even a half season, Dan, that seems too
severe. But they've already done something, so they're acknowledging one full year was ridiculous. So now we're down to half a season. I don't know. I think the problem, even McGary's like, I deserve to be punished. I'm not saying I shouldn't be punished. I just don't think a year was worth it, and I would agree with him. I think what my issue with it isn't really that there's what the punishment is. It's just at different times a year the punishment is higher. I mean, if you're taking a drug test, he said he passed, and Michigan and John Beilein basically went along with this. He wouldn't discuss it specifically, but said there's never been a positive test on him. He's passed 8 drug tests while he was at Michigan for the last 18 months. So they're tested relentlessly. Why the different standard? I guess that's really the thing. If you're going to have a penalty, have a consistent penalty. To just all of a sudden say, well, during this week and a half period, you're gone a year. The rest of the time, you're gone 3 games. I think that sends a confusing message, and I doubt a lot of the players really understand it. And then you've got a guy, he wasn't even playing. I think it's just, I don't know. I mean, if you're trying to performance-enhancing drugs, hey, you got to do that and all these other things, but it just seems a little bizarre, a 1-year penalty for a guy who's basically standing around cheering his teammates on.
If he didn't play in that one game he played in, or suit up rather, in that one game he played in during the season, would he have been under the umbrella of this testing policy?
Well, yeah, he would have. He played 8, and then in December his back was too bad and he stopped playing. But he dressed. The day he got tested, he actually dressed. Now, he dressed to stand on the bench. He was never going to play. John Beilein said, hey, look, let's fire everyone up and put Mitch in the uniform. Because if you watched any Michigan games, he was the biggest cheerleader in the country, figuratively and literally. And they put him in a uniform, and that was the day. But if you examine the NCAA policy, which to insomnia I did, they can actually test you if you're just on the travel party, if you're on a roster. Even if Mitch McGary was back in Ann Arbor in his dorm room watching the game on TV, the NCAA could say, we want to test him thousands of miles away. And so anybody on the roster, anyone involved. So it actually didn't matter that he suited up, but it was a coincidence that the one day he suits up, which is basically just a motivational play because, he was never playing, hasn't played for months. That's when he got tested.
Do you know the NCAA punishment for other things like, say, DUI or other types of drugs?
Well, there's extensive drug policies, and most of them involve performance-enhancing drugs, which, again, you got sports like wrestling and things. I mean, it's very important to have those. I don't think anyone's going to go against those.
Right.
But they have believe me, they have an extensive, long policy you can find on the Internet if you want to read it. I doubt it. But if you do, go ahead. But what's interesting is in their policy, it states we basically don't test what they call street drugs during the season. They don't care. It's only, and that's kind of strange. Like, they don't care except if you're in your tournament, now we care. So if you're at a bowl game, now we care whether you smoke pot. The rest of the time, we're not testing for it. I don't get why you bother. It's the inconsistency that just sort of, look, you have rules. You're a college athlete. This is the rule. Don't smoke pot. All right, you shouldn't smoke pot. It's just sort of the strange, sometimes we care, sometimes we don't, sometimes the penalty's this, sometimes the penalty's that. And in the end of the day, for just the NCAA, like, you're basically pushing a kid out of college. If the goal is to keep him in college and help him, if you really think he needs help for this, or you want to continue his education, or you want to keep having him play college basketball, this is a really punitive sanction that essentially sends him out. Again, you can't possibly imagine he's going to go, oh, okay, I'll wait 2 more years to enter the NBA draft. I'll wait till I'm 23. That's just not a reasonable thing, and I think you should see that coming.
Good to talk to you, Dan. Great story, and
Thanks,
we'll be talking about it.
All right, take care.
That's Dan Wetzel, Yahoo Sports. Just when you think you've seen it all from the NCAA, they come out and do something else that makes you scratch your head and wonder what in God's name they're up to over there.